This afternoon, we have three speakers from Florida Trust Management, formerly known as Sanibel Captiva Community Trust. They will speak on the basics of investing and financial planning. Megan Marquardt is the president of the Fort Myers Division of Wealth Services. She brings more than 20 years of experience serving trust and investment clients. Carolyn Rogers is Senior Vice President, Wealth Service Advisor. She is responsible for the development of client relationships in both Lee and Collier counties. And Jodi Schwartzel is Vice President, Portfolio Manager. She serves the Sanibel and Fort Myers market, identifying clients' investments, goals, and manages their portfolios. Please welcome Megan, Carolyn, and Jodi.
Pleasure being here today with all of you beautiful women and a couple gentlemen too. Can't ignore the guys in the crowd, the brave men that are here today. We are delighted to be here. This is something very, very important to us. As women, we're thrilled to have a team of women who are here to talk on behalf of women and some of their special needs that women have. Often we outlive the men, and a lot of this gets complicated and gets passed down to the women to handle. So we want to have a conversation with you today to just get you to start thinking. That's really what this is about. So it's financial planning for women, by women. So today we're going to talk about financial planning, investments, trusts, and then at the end, pay attention because we're going to have some scenarios that we're going to lay out for you, and we're going to see if you've learned anything today or see anything in these scenarios that might jump out at you. So we're going to look at suddenly single. You know, many women at different phases of their life sometimes find themselves single, whether they've lost a spouse or lost a spouse to divorce. We're going to address some of those key factors that we want to pass along to you. And then also, women of a certain age start to inherit money from their parents, from other family members, and suddenly may have a windfall and not know what to do with it. And sometimes these are blessings, but they can also be challenges as well. And then also we'll talk about midlife planning. And many of you may have daughters, granddaughters. We have multi-generational families in our company that we work with. So we want to, kind of put these things out to you and some wisdom that maybe you can pass down to your family members. And as Terry introduced us, I'm Carolyn Rogers, and Megan and Jodi will be participating in the program this morning. Or I guess it's this afternoon. So we left for you on your place is a notepad, and you can cross out the name on the top because we had a lot of these left over. But we this summer we became Florida Trust, and Florida Trust is a name that we fortunately our company had the foresight to reserve that name many years ago. But many of you that are here may know that we started in 2001 here on the island. And over time, we've opened the Naples Trust Company office. We've opened the Tampa Bay Trust Company office. And most recently, we opened the St. Pete office. And at that point, we were just saying, time out. We can't keep going with all of our logos as you can see there. So it really is just a consolidation. It's more of a strategy. For us, as we have grown up, we are now the largest independent trust company in the state of Florida. And by using the name, it just has created a lot of cohesiveness for all of us. So what we try to do is put you at the center. So you as a client, you as a friend, we are here to help anyone with questions. I know I spoke with someone earlier who has a friend who is kind of in need. Have her call us. We are here to impart wisdom and share anything we have with anyone. Doesn't mean if you're a client or not. This is about helping people, and that's really what we're here to do. And you can see through the wealth plan, we have many things that we assist our clients with, and these are things we can address with you should you ever have questions. From incapacity planning, because we know we just don't die one day, right? I mean, it sometimes takes an illness, people are sidelined either briefly or long-term. So we have incapacity planning, estate planning, trust services, estate settlement services, asset management, investment planning, financial planning, tax planning, risk management, charitable planning, and legacy planning. So these are all things that would fall into the realm of how we can help our neighbors here on Sanibel. So, I mentioned this earlier. Why? Why the girl power? Why are we trying to bring this message? Well, the truth is, women outlive men. Women live 5.8 years longer than men on average. There is a wealth gap. Women earn 85% of men's earnings, and that was in 2024. Work and family. Women are often the caregivers in the family and often don't have time to either be the one to earn the money and invest the money, but also are busy raising families. So that is why we're focusing on women. We're going to start off with financial planning, and I'll introduce to you Megan Marquardt.
It's musical microphones. Good afternoon, and yeah, thanks again for having us today. So I'm going to cover financial planning. We really like to take a holistic approach when we're working with families, and I kind of look at it as self-care, right? As women, you know, it's important to prioritize that, you know, making sure we're taking care of ourselves first. And part of that is making sure our finances are organized. So we really want this to be empowering for you today. So what is financial planning? Again, it's kind of taking a holistic approach, taking a look at all of your assets, your estate plan, creating goals financially for your family. You know, what are your goals? What are your objectives? Flow charting your estate plan. You know, we spend a lot of money working with an attorney to maybe draft a trust and a will. How does that really look? Have we revisited that recently? And when we do financial planning, we run what's called a Monte Carlo analysis. And so what we do is we stress test the plan. What happens if there are several years of bad investment returns? Will I still have enough money to live the rest of the years of my life? That's probably one of the biggest questions we get on a day-to-day basis. Determine the appropriate asset allocation to meet your financial objectives. And Jodi's going to touch a little bit on this in her part of the presentation, but it really begins with determining, okay, how much do I need in stocks or equities? How much do I need in fixed income or bonds? And how much cash do I need to have on hand? And then obviously we want to monitor and update the plan periodically. So we're going with cash is queen today. So kind of understanding your cash situation is a good starting point, and how much cash is appropriate to have in savings. And that's really a personal decision for each person here in the room. But it tends to be a multiple of what you're actually spending. And it can also be different depending if you're single, if you're married, if you're supporting family members. We typically say on average to have 6 to 12 months of savings, so 6 months worth of your expenses in a savings account. And recently, you know, our cash has been paying a little bit higher, so it hasn't been a bad thing to have a little extra cash in the bank, and that's changing, obviously. The cash flow in. So what type of cash is coming into your checking account? And we've listed a few things here. You know, your wages if you're still working, pension, Social Security, and then your passive income. You may have some rental properties here on the island, and then your investment income. And what's going out of the bank? This is always kind of hard to really pinpoint. because we've got our fixed expenses, which are easy to identify. They're the things coming out every month: mortgage, car payment, utilities, and then we've got your variable expenses, your groceries, gas, auto maintenance. And so, tracking those can be a little bit trickier. And then of course the discretionary spending. Are you gifting to family? Are you eating out a few nights on the island? Are nails and hair, back to the self-care? Got to kind of include all of that in your planning. And so here's just a quick sample of how the cash flow planning looks in our software. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we're projecting the green line is your inflows and the red line are the outflows. And so in this particular scenario, it's a couple, a married couple. They retire, so you see the big dip, I have to get my glasses on here. In 2029, that's when they have retired, and so their income has dropped tremendously in that year. And their expenses also drop. And then gradually they both kind of increase over time. And towards the end of the plan, 2057, Joe passes away. And so there's a life insurance policy that pays out to Jane in that end of life time frame. On the right-hand side of the screen, we're showing the projected portfolio value year over year. And so you can see it's kind of increasing up until that retirement age, and then it stays pretty steady, and then gradually the portfolio assets start to decline because they are needing more of the portfolio assets to support their lifestyle. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the Monte Carlo analysis, this is showing the returns based on average market conditions. And again, the blue line represents the ending portfolio value year over year. This is the portfolio value with above average market conditions. And then lastly, below average market conditions. So, Jane and Joe end up running out of money in that scenario. So the probability of success for this plan is 50%. And ideally, we like to see that at 80% or higher. So what we'll do with Jane and Joe is work with them and show them some scenarios. A, maybe they can start spending a little less money. B, maybe they need to take a look at their asset allocation and make some adjustments. So there's some really creative planning we can do based on this. So for Jane and Joe, we did show them this scenario, and this is a scenario showing this is contingency planning. What if one of them becomes incapacitated or has a stroke early on in life? And so they're going to have to spend more for the care. And so we've outlined this here in the flow chart here. And so the blue line was our original plan, the ending portfolio value year over year. Actually, I have that reversed. It's the gray line is the original. So because of the additional expenses for the care, the portfolio value is actually decreased by about $1 million. So it can really be impactful when we do this planning. So again, we're here to empower everyone. Getting organized is the first step. And I like to encourage people to create a personal balance sheet, just kind of knowing where your assets are, where the bank accounts are, how they're titled, and creating a personal board of directors. So having your team in place. Do you have a good CPA? Do you have a relationship with the CPA? Your attorney, your financial advisors, that's really important. And then creating a budget, kind of figuring out how much you're spending. So we have a couple different ways we help clients do this. We have some budget sheets that we can give them where they can actually handwrite in what they're spending under each category. We also encourage clients to take a look at their credit card statements or their bank statements. So you may have one, I call it the grocery bank account, the account you use day to day. You can kind of take a look at what's coming out in a 12-month period from the main bank account I use or the main credit card I use. There's also lots of fun apps and different software programs you can use, so that is also a great way to put together a budget. and encourage everyone to save. I mean, most of us here in this room, may not be working, so you've spent a lot of time already savings, but again, you may have children and grandchildren who are in that phase of life, and just the importance of maximizing their 401ks, contributing to that on a monthly basis. And planning for the unexpected. So to Carolyn's point, we don't just one day not wake up. There's usually a period of incapacity, so planning for those unexpected events. So I just thought I would summarize a few planning tips here, a few takeaways. Again, the balance sheet is really important. Is there an opportunity to simplify your financial life? A lot of us, moved here from somewhere else, so we may have a bank account up in Ohio and 529 plans for the grandkids, and there are some benefits to consolidating. Know your spending each month, kind of get a handle on that. Credit cards. I've had scenarios where I'm working with a surviving spouse and she has no credit in her name because the credit cards were all in her husband's name, and it can create a lot of problems. So make sure you own a credit card or have a credit card in your own name. Risk management, so your insurance. We've all been dealing with the insurance companies. I shop that every year for auto and homeowners, so just reminding myself to do that on an annual basis. We didn't talk about this a lot, but reviewing your account titling. Do I have beneficiary designations set up? And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we cover estate planning. A few websites here just to be helpful. You can create an account online at Social Security, so that's helpful to take a look at that. Credit reports, you can pull a free annual credit report on this website. I have my credit frozen and my daughter's credit frozen, and I always have to remember that when I go to buy a car to unfreeze it before I get there. But that's really important today's day and age. And having your team, your personal board of directors. Can't emphasize that enough. And before I hand it over to Jodi, I just also wanted to share this book I found online at Amazon. I don't know if you've seen this before. It's called The Peace of Mind Planner, and we can pass it around the room. I created one for myself electronically, so there's no secrets in here. So, but this is really helpful. It's something you can have. It's a gift to your family, really. So it's got really everything in here. Doctor's information, my financial information. There's a section for pets. So there's a little bit of everything in here. So I will pass this around, and I'll hand it to Jodi now.
Thank you, Megan, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jodi Schwartzel. I'm a portfolio manager with Florida Trust, and I'm here to tell you that women are better investors than men. And so it's
Jodi,
really...
just put it closer to you.
Sorry, can you hear me better now? Yes. So women are better investors than men. Women usually start investing earlier in life, and that gives them the benefit, or us the benefit, of compounding interest. So earning money on money that you've earned. We're less impulsive oftentimes than men. We tend to buy and hold rather than make changes frequently. We're less likely to make changes during market volatility. We are more risk adverse, and we're more likely to ask questions and get help from other people who know more than us. So just like we stop and ask for directions if we can't find our way, we stop and get help too with investments. All right, let me make sure. All right, what this says for those in the back is my investing strategy: just believe and kiss a lot of toads. And while I do believe that having faith is very important, I also believe that knowledge is empowering. So it's important to understand what we're doing and take the time to get educated. So the purpose of investing is to guide you to reach your long-term goals, like Megan discussed with financial planning. And the first part of that is understanding your risk. So you want your money to outpace inflation. And there's different ways to look at risk. First, you have to understand more concrete things like your ability. So your time horizon, your income and cash flow, your net worth, and your financial goals. And then there are also less concrete things like how we feel. We women feel often, sometimes more than men. So, what our personality is, what our comfort level is, and maybe some past experiences go into that as well. So taking all that together is we can help determine what your risk tolerance is and what you're willing to accept. You don't want to have investments that are so risky you're worried all the time or it's tough to sleep at night. You want to be comfortable and understand what you have. So you want to understand your goals and then also understand your risk tolerance. And that brings us to your investment objective. So the most aggressive at the top of the screen is capital growth. The most conservative, all the way at the bottom, is capital preservation. And then in between, we have things like growth and income and balanced. And what this really determines is how much stock or equities, bonds or fixed income, and cash that you need to have on hand. And that gives us your overall asset allocation. So what your asset allocation refers to is how much stock you have, how much fixed income or bonds you have, and how much cash you have as well. Let's see. Once your asset allocation is determined, we want to make sure that within your asset allocation, you're also very reasonably diversified, which means very simply that your money is spread across a mix of investments to reduce your overall risk. So the idea is that sometimes one stock or one bond might not perform as well, and during that time we hope some of the other ones do, and that evens out your volatility, makes your investment ride smoother, so to speak. And so you can diversify in lots of different ways. You can diversify across, at the top, growth and value in stocks. You can diversify across different industries or sectors. You can diversify stocks and bonds in different geographic regions. So not, say we had all our investments in Sanibel and there was a bad hurricane, you can be diversified. So you want to be diversified in lots of different ways to help you reduce your risk. So this is an example of basically kind of a growth and income or balanced portfolio. The tan gold color at the top represents bonds. The green color represents stock, and this is two different time periods. The arrow follows two different time periods. At the beginning of each time period, the person or portfolio started off with 60% stocks and 40% bonds. Over the first time period, from October 2007 to February 2009, based on market events and what was going on in the market, the portfolio changed. It didn't keep its original allocation. Bonds, the allocation to bonds grew and the allocation to equities shrunk. So equities weren't doing as well during this time period. And so this portfolio became much more conservative than the investor originally intended. In the second section, between February 2009 and December 2021, the market was gaining momentum and growing. So the stock allocation in this portfolio grew from about 60% to about 90%. So now, without rebalancing, this person's portfolio becomes very aggressive and much more aggressive than they want it to be. So if we do have a pullback in the market, they could be looking at a statement one quarter and it looks, just the way they wanted to, growing, and then if we have a dip, it could pull back much more than they wanted it to or expected it to, or are ready or comfortable with it pulling back. So it's good to rebalance back to your original risk allocation from time to time. And there's a lot that determines that. Everything from taxes and capital gains and different exposures and what type of account it is In retirement accounts, we don't have to worry so much about capital gains, but in individual brokerage accounts, we have to think about that a little bit more. Oops, I'm gonna stay on the slide for another minute. Make sure I covered everything. Okay. And then these are long lists, and I know it might be hard to see. So these are questions that you might ask either your current financial advisor, if you're thinking about changing, or a new one that you might meet. So are you a fiduciary? I always have a hard time with that word. But it means, are you bound to act in the best interest of your client? So it's really important to work with someone who's a fiduciary in investments, because they are obligated to always act in your best interest rather than their own. What is your experience and qualification? What is your investment philosophy? Who decides the investment approach? Is it formulaic? Is it one size fits all? Or are you going to do something personal based on my needs, goals, and risk tolerance? How often are you going to meet with me? Are we going to meet every month, every quarter, every year? Am I never going to hear from you again? Those kind of things. Where will your money be held? How will it be kept safe? Is it in, some distant land? Is it well protected? Does it have insurance? All of that good stuff. How will your accounts be structured? Are there separate managers? Different things like that. Where will your investments be and who's in charge of running them? How will you manage the taxes? Will you do some dollar cost averaging? Will you look at capital gains and losses at the end of the year and make sure they're well balanced, so I'm taking advantage of the best tax situation that you can? Do you use proprietary products, your own products? Some companies do that to increase fees and things like that. If so, what are the fees? Understand how your advisor is paid. Are they commission-based for every trade that they place or every bond or stock that they buy? Or is it based on a percentage of assets under management? When you have a review with your financial advisor, it's important to ask, how you're doing. Are you still allocated to your risk tolerance? Are you aligned with your goals? How are my taxes going to be affected this year? It's a good thing to check in on this time of year. If there's anything, if you've taken some capital gains, because we've really had a run in the market over the last couple years, if you've taken some capital gains, or are there any losses in sectors like healthcare or elsewhere that you might be able to balance some of those gains with? How much are you paying in fees? And what services do you offer that I might not have taken advantage of? We're always encouraging our clients, Carolyn showed you that big circle of everything that we can help you with, to really take advantage of all of our services and, I don't know what I did, and help you look at the big picture. Let's see if I go down. Escape. Perfect, thank you, Carolyn. Really make sure that you're taking advantage of all the services that your financial provider offers. When you review your statement, either a paper statement you get in the mail or more secure online, look at your account balance. Where did you start the month out at, and where are you ending the month out at? How much income has your portfolio generated? How's your asset allocation looking? Is it still within a relative balance, close to what you're thinking that it should be? And you can always run through your transactions, buy, sells, incoming, outgoing, to make sure that everything looks as it should. Key takeaways are: know who's on your team, know your advisors. If you have multiple investment advisors, it's great for them to be able to talk to each other. Sometimes people maintain a financial advisor up north and one more locally. It's great for us to talk to each other, because we can help make sure that you don't have a lot of, say, Microsoft stock up north that we don't know about, and we put you in some more Microsoft down here. It's not really helpful to help your diversification. So it's great for us to talk to each other. It's also great for us to talk to your tax advisor, so we know what your tax situation looks like. And if you have a loss somewhere else, we might be able to take some more gains in your portfolio to make sure that we can maintain your risk allocation a little bit more. So it's great to know who your team is. Understand all the services, know your overall asset allocation across all your accounts, educate yourself. We do have quarterly webinars that you can see replays of online at our website, floridatrust.com. And we also have a newsletter called Sightline. We've got some over here on the table. And know your tax bracket and how your investments affect your taxes. There's things that you can do like qualified charitable distributions from your IRAs that are very advantageous to you and some of the charities that you love here on Sanibel. So there's always good things that you can look at and take advantage of. And I will pass the floor back to Megan to talk a bit about estate planning.
Okay, so why is estate planning important? It's one of those things that's like cleaning out your closet. It's like the last thing you want to do, right? But it does give you some control. What happens if I'm incapacitated or when I pass? So not that we're controlling, but it's just making sure things are in place, getting organized. We also want to help people reduce taxes, whether it's income taxes or estate taxes, and avoiding probate. Probate isn't a terrible thing, but if you can avoid it, it saves a lot of time and expenses. And if you have minor children, I don't know if any of us do here, maybe Jodi, yeah. It takes care of that as well. And the family disagreements, that's a big one. We work with a lot of families, and when we're going through their estate planning documents, we often hear, everybody gets along. Everybody loves one another, gets along, they're no problem until something happens. And we see a lot of different things happen when money gets involved. And so, you can design your estate plan to avoid some of those conflicts. And so, the trust company is often named to serve in some of these fiduciary roles, like as a co-trustee with a family member. And that way we can kind of be the bad guy. And the siblings can preserve their relationship and keep that intact. So that's really important. And again, we want to make sure everybody's taken care of when we're not able to be there to do that. So we'll just run through a few of these. These are the key estate planning documents. Your will, the HIPAA document, healthcare surrogate, preneed guardianship, durable power of attorney, last will and testament, and revocable living trust. So hopefully everybody here has some or most of these documents. Just a quick outline, the will is kind of the cornerstone of your estate plan. It's the document where you name the person to settle your estate, so that's a big job. So make sure you've named the right people to serve in that role. I had a client at Shell Point years ago, and he and his wife, like I said, we're at Shell Point. She had early onset dementia, and he was a little bit older than her. And they had 3 very successful children. One was a CPA, one was a doctor, and one owned his own business. And so he sent his documents off to the 3 children and said, would any of you consider, serving as executor or trustee? And weeks went by, he didn't hear from them. And finally he called his oldest son and he said, why haven't I heard from you? And he said, well, Dad, we've all talked. And number 1, we don't live in Florida. Number 2, we have very busy careers. And 3, our kids are, in grade school and high school, and we're really busy. And so he ended up naming the trust company to serve with one of the children, and it worked out really nicely for them. So to name a PR, they have to either be a family member or live in the state of Florida, so that's important. And this is the document that's actually filed in the probate court after you pass away. So make sure you know where your original will is, and make sure that someone else knows where it is too. So that's important. And I'm kind of going off script, but when you name these individuals to serve in your documents, whether it's healthcare surrogate, durable power of attorney, you may want to sit down and have a conversation with them so that A, they know where the document is, and they're willing to do this job that you're asking them to do. So that's really important. A revocable living trust, a lot of us have a trust. It's basically a contract with yourself. You typically serve as your own trustee, or you may be co-trustee with your spouse. There are benefits to having a trust because we're often asked, well, do I really need a trust? Am I okay with just having a will? And it's not necessarily about, the size of your estate. The benefits are that assets titled in your trust avoid probate. It offers, some level of privacy because you're not having to open this huge probate estate. It really does provide some continuity when there's incapacity. So there's language in there regarding incapacity and how the trust assets are going to be managed when you become incapacitated. And a couple of other things, again, it controls the disposition or distribution of assets after you pass, and it just helps with that wealth transition from one generation to the next. A few other important documents, a separate writing. So if you have jewelry, cars, furniture, that's all considered tangible personal property. If you have any of those items that you specifically want to leave to one family member, you can create a special writing. It needs to be signed and dated. Again, make sure someone knows that that exists, and that could be your attorney or your personal representative. Beneficiary designations, so on your IRAs, for example, make sure your beneficiaries are updated. You may have a prenuptial or postnuptial agreement. Your Florida homestead, that's a real big one down here, making sure your home is homesteaded. Your digital assets, your passwords and logins, that can be a real challenge for family members. So making sure you've got those saved somewhere safely. And then of course, your end of life wishes. Have you prepaid for your funeral expenses? All of those things, just kind of having that all buttoned up. So we've got a few planning tips here. We do recommend that you review your plan every few years because things change. You may have a new grandbaby. There may have been a passing, so just making sure that those are updated. Working with your team to make sure those other documents we talked about are updated. And we mentioned this again, providing the individuals we've named with the right information. So, the book I'm passing around, that's something, like for my girls, mine's on a flash drive, but it's in a safe, they would know where to go to find the information. And family meetings, those are really important. We facilitate a lot of those. Some families are really transparent about the estate and the plan, and others are more private, but it does help if everybody is on the same page and working together. And then if you are a business owner, making sure there's some succession planning for the business. We met with a family earlier who they own several different business entities, and what's going to happen to those when I don't know if the wife really understands all of the day-to-day work that goes into managing these businesses. Are the kids willing to jump in and help if dad becomes incapacitated? So just kind of having those discussions is important. So I will pause here to see if there are any questions before we jump into the fun part. Yes?
You said something about your, I think it was, one of the issues on there was that the person you have representing your estate should be a Florida resident. What if you don't have children that do not live in Florida?
If it's a family member, they can serve.
Okay.
Yes, so the question was, does your personal representative have to live in Florida? If they're a family member, they do not have to be a resident.
I'm under the understanding that if it's your son-in-law, that doesn't count. It has to be a blood relative.
I believe you're right. I can check for you.
I think I learned that at one of your seminars.
Okay. Good. Yes.
You're talking about credit cards. We have credit cards, but they all are joint. Should there be one that's separate?
Well, as long it's a jointly owned account, that should pass to the surviving spouse at the first death. But I would call your credit card company just to confirm. My girls have a credit card, but I'm the owner and I pay the bill. I'm working on that transition right now. It is really important. Each credit card company is a little bit different. So it'd be worth calling just to check.
Yes, I don't know if it's my first one, but oftentimes it is based on one person's social security number. So a lot of people are surprised that they haven't been generating a credit history if it has not been in their social security number.
Yes.
What happens to us snowbirds who are going back and forth and are considering changing our place of residence?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So the question was, if you're a snowbird and considering changing your place of residence, you should come to our domicile presentation on Thursday. We work with a lot of families on the island who are going through that process. My fiance is going through that process now. Just a quick tip on that, there's an app called TaxBird, and so you can track, maybe some of you use that already, but you can track the number of days, and it's all based on GPS. So you need to be here, well, you all know, at least 6 months. So, but that's an easy tool to use, and my fiance has 5 more days, so.
And then the second part of that question is, let's say all of your trusts are in the state that you're leaving, and the trust company is in charge of it. They're going to be the ones taking care of it, no family members named. What do you do then?
So the question is, if your trust names your domicile or your place of residence as a non-Florida state, we recommend that you take a look at that. We have attorneys on staff that review trust documents, but the Florida code is different than the New York code and the Ohio code, and so you don't want any problems from an estate. Some states.
Just don't hold it down below, hold it
Okay.
up above.
Okay, is that better? Hello?
Yep, you muted it.
So I would take a look at that. Yeah, because some states have an estate tax. So especially if you're coming from one of those states, it's important to have that updated. And it could be just a simple amendment where you're changing your situs or your place of residence.
But do you have to change if it's a trust company that is going to take care of the trust, no family members named?
Yeah, it depends.
Okay.
Those documents can get,
Tricky.
they're like in a binder this thick. So you just want to make sure you read all the details. So, but that's something we would be happy to help with. So.
And we do have clients in several different states, several different countries even. So I know that we've settled estates and had to go to New Hampshire, and oh my gosh, this guy had a collection of antique cars that weren't even insured. like things like that we stepped in immediately, changed the locks, get the insurance, we had to get involved. But that does mean travel, so, that's a thing. So possibly your trust company up there may need to know more about what's happening down here and have that communication, so. But yeah, we have Thursday at 1 o'clock at our office, you're welcome to come. We have different attorneys that do it with us. We're trying to do it monthly through seasons, so maybe one of those, just keep your eye out. You might want to.
Thursday.
Yeah, there'll be more,
That's my fusion.
Yeah, there'll be more. Okay, let's have some fun. Okay, scenario 1. We've got a couple who've been married for 50 years. The wife is 80, the husband is 75. He has dementia. There's 2 adult children and 6 grandchildren. The portfolio is worth $20 million. Of it, half of it is in one stock. The annual expenses is $250,000. They have $10,000 of cash in the bank. There's no life insurance, but he has a long-term care policy. They want to help with grandchildren's education. Estate planning documents were updated 5 years ago. They have a 44-year-old daughter who has a pending divorce. Do any flags go up reading this?
Multiple.
I mean, where do you start? Does anyone want to just toss out one thing that's concerning?
Stock.
They need to
The stock.
diversify.
Diversification? Both of you picked up on that?
Not enough cash for annual expenses.
Very
No
good.
emergency fund.
Very good. Anything else? How about that daughter that's getting divorced?
That could be trouble for the daughter.
Okay, well, here's some recommendations. The asset allocation, very, very good. And the historical returns. How much risk do they need to take? One stock diversification and tax planning. That's concerning. Review the long-term care policy for possibly covering his health care expenses. Estate planning protections for the beneficiaries, the daughter and the grandchildren. The life insurance planning and wealth replacement, depending on, sometimes you can get a life insurance policy to cover your assets that would be otherwise spent out in taxes, depending on the size of the estate. Estate planning for the husband's incapacity. Who's managing the money? Who's signing the checks? What's happening? He's losing his capacity. Annual exclusion and gifting for the education planning. They said that they wanted to take care of the kids' education. So there's an annual exclusion that they could be gifting out every year. And then also you touched on that, is the cash savings adequate for needs? And do we want to say any more about the divorce situation?
As far as the daughter getting divorced? So, I mean, there can be some asset
Just
protection.
use the mic so that it'll pick up on the recording. Thank you.
There's some asset protection. You don't want, if the daughter or a child is to inherit some funds and inheritance, you want it to probably stay with that child and not to go with a spouse if she is to get divorced, and you want it to probably be passed on then to the grandchildren. So there is some estate planning you can do to make sure that those things are protected.
Yeah, to Jodi's point, so leaving the assets to the daughter in trust versus outright.
Yeah.
So would provide some creditor protection for the daughter.
Okay. Number 2, this is our windfall example. Did you have a question?
In that instance, aren't there spendthrift trusts within your planning so that can be, you can avoid all of that early on by knowing who's getting the money and what their situations are, and actually describing all of it in detail.
Yes.
And having your executor know in advance of that,
Right.
so that the money is going where you want. It is not going to be cast
Well,
For the
and
win.
usually and often as corporate trustee, we serve in that capacity, and we actually have a client, Jodi and I have right now, who's got 2 daughters. One, she's very close by, very close relationship. The other is in a relationship with a, non-desirable person, and they are concerned about this, what he'll do if he could get his hands on some of this money. So it may be the one daughter just gets the money outright and the other daughter will be in trust. It depends on the situation. And again,
bypass the daughter altogether and go to the grandkids.
it can do that as well. There's whatever variations you can think of are pretty much possible.
Yeah. So if you're giving it to them in trust, you can write whatever language that you want, and your trustee is supposed to follow it, and that's what we do as being a corporate trustee. So what you're talking about is what we call HEMS, health, education, maintenance, and support, and then there can be additional distributions, above that. But yes, we can put in or an attorney can put in whatever spendthrift provisions that you think make the most sense for your beneficiaries.
And we are bound to follow the directions in the document. And of course, we invest the money we have to bear in mind the inheritance.
Yes, yeah, and sometimes, from an investment standpoint, we're trying to make the money last for 30 years. Sometimes we're trying to make it last for multiple lifetimes. And so, that's a lot to consider when investing. And not distributions.
That's with your attorney. Good? Okay. All right, so the windfall. So the husband, here they are, they're married 50 years. Again, the wife is 80, the husband's deceased. He unexpectedly passed away. The wife is healthy. She's got 3 adult children, 8 grandchildren. Her portfolio is at $6 million. Her husband's business buy-sell arrangement left her with $40 million in cash. Her annual income need is $200,000, and the estate planning documents exist, but the husband is listed as the trustee, and he's deceased. There's $1 million of term life insurance for her until 80 years old. She's 80. Anything stand out there? I heard you go, ooh, 40 million in cash, the buy-sell arrangement, that's a windfall, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what do you do with that when you're 80 years old?
She needs to hire somebody like you.
You can buy
She needs to hire somebody like you.
She needs to hire someone like us. Okay. Yes, and that's right. She has an estate tax issue. The estate tax is, what, 26 million for a couple-ish? It's changing every year.
It's, I think, 13.9 million per person this year.
Right. It's
Beware of anybody who wants to befriend you at that point.
Yeah.
well, you laugh.
That's a valid thought. Yes.
It's a great comment. All right, let's take a look. So here's some recommendations. You need to look at your asset allocation and your risk tolerance. Review and update your estate planning documents. Who should be the trustee now? And the annual gifting and philanthropy, they could do a lot of things now to get that out of their estate for the future generations to reduce their estate tax. Life insurance review, do they still need it? Well, I guess at this point at 80 and he's gone, probably not. We don't get involved in life insurance as far as we don't sell any kind of products or anything like that in our company, but we do have consultants that we work with that look at our clients, even our employees' life insurance policies and do reviews once in a while. It's important to do that, and you'll be surprised sometimes with what you find out. We've had to do a lot of that this past year, a couple clients. And then asset protection strategies. Again, looking at trusts, and there's charitable lead trusts, there's all kinds of different options that this person may need to do. It's a blessing, but it's also a challenge. So there's a lot of great things that can be done with this, but they need to take action, and probably pretty quickly. All right, here's our last one. This is a midlife planning example. Again, those of you who have children maybe in midlife,
This is a couple, she's 63, he's 63, I'm almost 63. But I've been married a lot longer than 8 years. So this is a second marriage. They're a recently retired couple, lucky. Annual income need of $150,000. The wife has 4 children from her first marriage. He's got 2 from his first marriage. There's a $30,000 pension for the husband with no survivor benefits. Social Security, I guess I'm going to say, assuming it's combined, is $30,000 a year. They have a $3.2 million portfolio. They have Ohio estate planning documents exist, but respective children are trustees. No life insurance and no long-term care. Short marriage, probably the kids aren't necessarily friendly with the other side of the family. That always gets tricky. Does she have enough? I guess it depends. That 3.2 million portfolio, we're going to assume that's a joint account. Let's see what the survey says. Okay, well, midlife planning recommendations, budget. What is their portfolio income requirements? How much do they need off of that income or off that portfolio to combine with their estate or their Social Security? So that was $30,000. So they have quite a bit that they require from their investments. What happens to the husband's income if he dies? Well, we saw that doesn't transfer. So his pension ends with him. The investment objective and risk, where are they? Do they need to be more conservative? The Ohio estate planning documents, do they need to update their documents to Florida? Who should be the trustee, and how do they not disinherit their children? Consider life, health, or long-term care insurance. Those are all possibilities. They're still young. Are current savings adequate for emergencies? And what planning is in place for their children or grandchildren? And again, a blended family. So as you can see, these all pose challenges, which are, again, blessings, but also challenges for the families that are here to deal with keeping their children and their families as a happy unit. So we see this a lot as a trust company, as you can imagine, and pretty much if you can think it, we see it. And I've certainly learned a lot being part of it. So again, we are the trust company. I've got several of the program that we did today. I think there's 10 or 15 here if you'd like to take one with you as a handout. I know that this is being recorded for others. If anyone and those who may be watching have any questions, we are here, we are your neighbors, we want to help, whether you're our clients or not. So please consider that. Please tell your friends, and if you can think that it can happen, so let us help you with that. Any more questions?
Well, that was